of owning a cafe, and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tristero. Chapter 154. The Game of Generals. It took, by his guesstimation, Honjo half an hour to stomp back into the kitchen with a plastic bag filled with the cheapest essentials he'd asked for, and from looking at them, he'd not had to go that far. The red-ended tinge across his gleaming dome suggested he'd been out in the midday sun, which also meant that there was a convenience store nearby, which meant they were potentially only 10 to 15 minutes away from some kind of suburban center, or maybe they were a 10 to 15 minute distance beneath one. Here, the thug grunted whilst dropping the bag at his feet, before he grumbled his way over to the table and muttered something along the lines of not being a fucking butler, let alone a babysitter, as he slumped his bulky form into one of the rickety chairs with an irritated huff. Arching a brow, Shouta grabbed the bag up and regarded the oven mitts, tea cloths, and a pack of 5 generic baubles. Then, humming contemplatively, he decided to get to work. He'd planned out what he wanted to make, of course. Chicken and or tofu ramen to start with, plus an assortment of pickles, tempura, and miso soup. Then, for dessert, lavender shortbread and apple tarte tatin would hopefully keep them appeased until dinner time, if they made it that far. God, what he wouldn't give for Toshinori to come bowling through the ceiling, as he had done when Boss-sama was threatening his fledgling community with his classic shout of "Watashi ga kita!" He'd always found it a little cheesy before, but now he'd gladly hear it and allow the man he'd fallen in love with to whisk him and the lovely little girl he'd met the hell out of here without a backward glance. Yagi Aizawa Toshinori had never been more grateful for the privacy afforded to him by the staff of Tokyo International Airport, as the news of Captain Celebrity's private jet en route to land that afternoon, making his anticipated visit to Japan a whole week early. The entirety of arrivals had been swamped by scurrying, snap-happy paparazzi, microphone and TV camera prime journalists, and the ever-hungry tabloid media. God. As he and Mirai were ushered through a secondary set of corridors to find only Tomura, Dabi, Neto, and Hitoshi, with Atsuhiro waiting for them, he actually felt himself take a real breath for the first time since Tokuda had told him the heartbreaking news. Done! Wrapping his arms around his son and the lad's iris-haired best friend, the sun-kissed pro held them close and breathed them in. "Boys," he murmured, "we're going to find him, all right?" he promised whilst giving them a reassuring squeeze. "How you holding up, Your big brother told me that you found his Hello Kitty bauble. We'll get it repaired for him, okay?" he added whilst they looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. He felt the fractured, bleeding pieces of his heart shatter further as their gazes locked. If only he'd been here, then... "What are you gonna do, Chi-san?" Hitoshi breathed as they began walking, his head inclining politely at Kimiko as she dabbed at her face with a strawberry-dotted hanky, whilst the airport staff quietly spoke on radios and featureless doors opened for them to walk through. "Kenji is trying to build a timeline, and he's looking out for any vehicles that could have... Nodding, the number 1 pro coughed a little. "My sidekicks are working with our friends to map everywhere around Mr. Tofu and further afield," he tried to soothe. "They believe that they've identified the van involved in Shou's abduction," he managed to get out. "And I promise the second I know any more, I'll call you." "Wait, what?" Nato huffed, his eyes shrinking in anger and hurt as his sneakered feet planted firmly into the thin carpeting that lined the thankfully private walkway, the whole party stopping at his cry of betrayal. "Oh, no, You mean you're going to your offices without us?" "Son, he tried as the teenage blonde pulled away from him, a scowl marring his lips. "Please, I meant to make sure that you're..." "What? Safe at home? Safely out of the way, you mean?" The youth veritably spat as Itoshi moved to stand with him, and the other adults hovered nearby, all of them sharing looks that varied from concern to upset. "That's bull..." "I think Neto-kun is right, Toshi. He and Toshi-kun should come with us, especially in the first instance," Blinking, the three of them looking to Mirai, the bronze pro felt his shoulders deflate. The last thing he wanted to do was cause further harm to what was already a terribly awful situation. He needed to come clean.
It's not that I don't want him or any of you, all of you with me,
he murmured, his hand reaching out to the still seething teenager who regarded it with a scathing glance, his face warring with a complex set of emotions that was only being magnified by Shota's absence.
Or to keep you out of the way, my boy, I swear, but I just...
He tried, his eyes screwing shut as he struggled to speak his truth aloud.
I'm afraid.
He admitted, the words eliciting a few quiet but breathy exhales from those looking on.
Having this happen, I thought I'd lived through my worst nightmares.
He breathed, his head shaking.
And I want to be strong. I want to...
You're doing this all by yourself, huh, big guy? Turning his crestfallen gaze towards Dabi as the man approached him, those turquoise eyes resolved, the so-called symbol of peace braced himself for further rebuke. Rebuke he thoroughly deserved. Hasn't Sho taught you anything? Feeling his eyebrows lift a fraction, he felt himself relax a little when the other didn't snarl or snark at him, but placed a hand upon his bicep. We are in this together, the youth reminded, whilst his own young husband came to his other side, gloved hands linking him and a still flustered Nato together. No one is expecting you to go rushing off into the city and magically find him yourself, you idealistic, well-meaning, selfless moron. He continued to chuckle, leaving him despite himself. When we last talked, you asked me to keep all of our precious people grounded, right? Well, that includes you, he told him bluntly, the tense mood around them all lifting a touch. Now, come on. We're all going to your offices, and no matter what happens, we're not going to turn on each other. We're not going to fall apart, and we're not going to charge around doing things by ourselves either. So you're the #1 pro, so what? You're a dad, mate, and actually a dad to a kid who totally loves you, even though you're a stupid ass sometimes, okay? We're a family, and we're going to help each other through this, he affirmed whilst appraising them all. Because that's what Sho would do. And knowing him, he'll be doing everything he can to help us find him, too, he stated, all of them nodding, their faces morphing from grim and upset to determined, within the quiet sanctuary of this secreted area, within an otherwise thrumming travel center. So come on, let's get to your cars and get going already. Ending his latest call with Rappa, Chisaki Kai leaned into his preferred sofa as Hadi finished typing up the ransom email, and Joy slipped the cleaned, polished, and vacuum-sealed rings into an envelope. Regardless of the opposition's strategy playing out a little faster, all of the playing pieces were upon the board. The stage was set, and everything was as it should be, wasn't it? Nay, Kai, him coming home so soon suggests a certain panic, wouldn't you say? Arching a chestnut brow at one of his most trusted associates, the young head of their organization puffed out a breath through his plain antiviral material-crafted face mask before allowing a hum to tremor up and out of his throat. So perhaps we should consider doubling the ransom price, ivory-haired time manipulator mused thoughtfully, exploiting this weakness in the so-hailed #1's legendary defenses. Could prove to be more profitable than even you'd thought, right, Mimic-san? Watching as the older man's doll-hidden form sealed the freshly sanitized envelope, his financial advisor huffed at the youngest member of the trio. You know I made the first one who got more cash, he admitted, their eyes locking from where the diminutive form perched on the armrest across from him. But, in the first instance, getting this payday should suffice whilst also ensuring that those people in that place can be trusted to do their jobs right. He advised, most of it is crawling with cops and pros. Some pros have even come from other parts of the country, you know. He continued, his tone peppered with disgust. And not that I don't have any faith in Wakasama or in the plan, but, he cut in, something close to a chuckle tilting his friend. The Yakuza work in the shadows. He nodded. Our boss would say the same, and following our initial guidelines, we could still milk this cash cow for all it's worth, and with our position secured. There is no need to be hasty. There is no need to give into immature assumptions when the shogi board is in our favor, he mused before sitting up to regard the field still sat upon their shared coffee table. Step 1. In a moment, Setsuna will call for the girl, and after she's had her preferred treat, she'll post the envelope without a fuss before our good friends in Madripoor bounce that email clearly stating our ransom and instructions around the world a while before landing it in that fool's fund mail account, he murmured whilst leaning forward, his white-gloved fingers moving apiece. Step 2. Since they'll have no way of contacting us, the pigs will advise Yagi to forward an amount of money, perhaps not all of it, to our account in the Seychelles, in vain hope of digitally piggybacking the transaction for further information on the second they do. Their entire system will be spiked, but an incredibly potent virus. He grinned, a further piece moved. Step 3. We wait a few days for the dust to settle, for the shock to be absorbed before sending a copy of Redestro's favorite book to his offices with a lock of Aizawa's hair inside, because why shouldn't we kill two birds with one stone? He all but purred as his pieces advanced to take the stationary ones across from him. The fallout of that big-nosed man's alleged army going toe-to-toe with the top-ranked heroes will do a great deal to shatter public opinion and trust, let alone take out someone whose goals are so at odds with ours. Metal liberation. Why not just bring back the Black Death? He grumbled, his eyes rolling before he preened a little. His side's advancement across the shogi tiles was almost absolute, whilst Harry and Joy watched on. And by then, in the weeks that'll span across Yagi's desperate yet fruitless search for his precious husband, our production line will be up and running. Eri will be more attached to Aizawa, and he to her. And this will make holding their well-being at stake in exchange for compliance all the easier. Easy enough, I think, that we'll be able to move to our larger compound, with our adversaries none the wiser. He breathed as his tiles advanced towards the king. In a year's time, I predict that the Shia Hasakai will be the ruling class once more. He grinned, a flick of his finger sealing his unseen opponent's fate as the prized piece toppled over the edge. Ajisaki-sama will awake into a world that deserves him at last. Dishing up generous portions of ramen to the Yakuza bastards who'd abducted him in some strange way reminded him of those Western fables he'd read to his Kirsada siblings and the study group when they were younger. But the pickles, you greedy prick. Oh, yes. He was pretty sure that should a fairy tale author happen to peek in and observe this meal being eaten, then he'd be cast as some variation of Wendy from Peter Pan, Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle, and if you squinted a little, how did you get flayed around on tofu? Shit, Sakaki, you prick right in your fucking cork while I'm eating. If I have to throw up this food, I'm gonna all over you. A dash of Snow White, only instead of 7 dwarves of varying manners and mannerisms, he had 7 swearing, noodle-chugging, broth-slurping Yakuza at the bigger, unstable table, and the 3 executives primly sat at a better wooden structure upon plush stools. Aizawa, you said there was more, right? Well, get in her ass and bring it over already. He and Eri, however, had been confined to the floor in the corner of the room, away from the door. Hey, don't fucking hog it, old guts of comment, Timmy! He'd spoken with her quietly and kept an ear out for his new employer, dropping any pertinent information. He'd also set a timer so that his baked goods didn't burn. Or the fuck are you coming, Timmy, you bucka yarrow? God, how had he been abducted by this peanut gallery? Oi, settle down, you unruly fuckers. I can't eat with you shaking the table. If you spill any of my broth, I'll kill you. Out of all the things he expected himself to feel fucking embarrassed wasn't one of them. Oh yeah, come over here and make us your creepy looking Blink Dr. cosplaying motherfucker. Sighing, a gentle hand ruffling Eri's hair, Shouta pulled himself into a stand and walked to the electric stove. Then, his hands working quickly, he reheated the additional noodles he'd set on side and warmed up the broth once more before turning to his captors and arching a brow at them because, whether they liked it or not, he wasn't going to play the damsel working just as a matter of course. No, he was going to go full Mary Poppins if he had to.
Okay,
He stated as he brandished a ladle and rudely pointed it at them each in turn after silencing the chiming timer vibrating on the work surface which rested between them.
You all board this?
He asked, his tone calm and authoritative.
Then you can have it, but it's about time you boys followed some rules.
He said, the majority of them bulking at him, whilst Overhaul looked on curiously.
No more screaming, yelling, and cussing. There's an impressionable child present, and since your boss is so interested in your organization going up in the world, it's about time you dropped your sass and had some class.
He huffed, his eyes never being a touch, as they openly gaped at him.
So, if you want the best of my cooking instead of the bare basics, you'll form an orderly queue with your bowls, then sit back down, and if you can't talk in a way that doesn't involve such vulgar things, then you'll not say anything.
He furthered, as they looked owlishly from him to their leader.
Oh,
he continued,
out of that isn't enough incentive.
He hummed before taking a few steps back, his hands pulling the overdoor open to allow the sweet scents of honey-baked lavender and rich apple cinnamon to flood into the kitchen.
Whoa!
I just let out.
Fine. Hey, me first, you idiot. Oink, that's my bowl.
The bastards were lining up with mimics similarly coming over, empty dish in hand for his next helping, and as he asked them what they wanted and provided it for them, Yagi Aizawa Shouta decided that for now, he could manipulate the playing field he'd been thrown into in these subtle ways.
Thanks.
I'm not gonna get those pickles too.
Mate, you dumbass. No cussing your bowl around. I wanna eat, you know.
Because if these bastards saw him as something more than a pawn, then maybe, just maybe, he could turn the tides of this game. A game that was for keeps.
Is there any more miso? My grandma used to make stuff just like that, you know.
Oh, give me some grandma. Are you big baby?
Shut up, you idiot. What? You didn't have no grandma. It was nice, yeah?
A game he intended to win.